Wow, Pledge getting the orchestra going over there. We got a full-fledged orchestra playing. Hi, everybody. This is The Blitz here on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star. I'm Joe Reinagel. Jason Minix spending some time with family this Christmas week. Wishing him all the best. And I know a guy that loves to spend time with his family. Saw some great pictures of RJ Ochoa and family yesterday. And he joins us now on the Buyers Barricade guest line. RJ, Merry Christmas to you, my friend.
Merry Christmas, Joe. Great to be with you. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Thanks to Pledge for the orchestra. I'm surprised the Jabberwockies didn't walk in. That was pretty epic right there at the beginning.
No, so see, that went right over my head. Is that a Star Wars thing?
No, they're a dance
kind
group.
of.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a dance group. They wear masks.
Okay.
They're in Vegas. You've seen them. You've definitely seen them like on TikTok. I know you're big on them.
This is my favorite. TikTok. Every now and then. Not bad. Well, RJ, news today coming out. There's a couple of different conflicting reports. Diana Rossini's reporting that it looks like Mike McCarthy will be back with the Cowboys in 2025. But I've seen others that he could be in demand elsewhere and have some options. What is your read on those reports today?
I think that we need to remember that ahead of this season, Mike McCarthy hired a new agent. And, this is his time to shine, right? Like, this is his time to really kind of, work for the first time. And so the idea of other reportedly interested teams is a bit far-fetched, but I also don't think it is. I know it's hip and it's cool to act like Mike McCarthy's the dumbest person in the world. And, the unfortunate reality is he lost the PR battle to Aaron Rodgers many moons ago. And a lot of people decided what they were going to think about him in that moment and have been, unwilling to change their mind. I think that the more you assemble this casserole, it's difficult to imagine a world where he's not the team's head coach next year. What with, if you want to factor in their little recent run of success, how the players have kind of gone to bat for him, how they've kind of, I thought Dak Prescott's quote about, his terms was the most telling. I think everyone acknowledges he was sort of set up to fail this year. And then I think when you do the math beyond that and say, well, who else is going to be there? Like, who else is going to be the guy? And even if you are looking for a guy, are you even the most desirable team that's going to be on the market looking for a head coach? All signs to me kind of point to Mike McCarthy returning.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I'll tell you something, RJ, as much as he was criticized, and you mentioned this, but the guy's done a hell of a job. I mean, you have to give Mike McCarthy a lot of credit for this team that nobody thought would win as many games as they're winning this year, especially the way they started. And he's got them playing and playing hard. And, they're going to go up to Philadelphia, whether they win or lose, but it's a grudge match. And I think Mike McCarthy deserves a lot of credit.
I think that they might win both of these games, not because I think that they're necessarily better than Philly or Washington, but because Philly and Washington are almost effectively locked into their respective playoff positions. So you could wind up, playing some lame ducks, and that could ultimately, to your point, we'll forget the context of it all in a month and be talking about, man, they went 9-8 after that. They were 3-7, things like that. And look, I think that I maintain that the man has gotten no credit for anything positive that has happened under his watch. Prior to last season, he dismissed Kellen Moore, and everybody said, oh, Kellen's going to LA. He's going to turn Justin Herbert into the next great thing. That didn't happen, and nobody cared. Nobody said a word about Kellen Moore. Meanwhile, the Cowboys had the most prolific offense they'd ever had in the Dak Prescott era. I know how it ended in the playoffs. I'm not saying this was worthy of a Super Bowl or anything, but he was right. I mean, if any other head coach said, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this guy and I'm going to take over play calling and whatever, and yielded the results that he did, they would have songs sang about them. But Mike McCarthy wasn't in discussions for coach of the year or anything like that last year, again, because people have this bias worked up against him because of what Aaron Rodgers did. And so when you examine everything he's done, I do think he's made them a bit more of an actual football operation. It's very difficult to parse through the Cowboys of it all, but consider that the Cowboys have had more Netflix series announced this year than they had external free agent signings. I mean, it is a very difficult line to walk that he manages to do it in an effective way.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And Jerry says it in one of those Netflix promos, right? It's a soap opera, 365 days a year. So Mike McCarthy's got to deal with that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. I fully expect Jerry to offer him a contract. And whether he takes it or not remains to be seen. But That's what makes an interesting offseason. Another coach, Mike Zimmer, is he going to come back? Do you think he deserves another opportunity?
When we were at the Super Bowl in Las Vegas in that house that had like 4 different levels to it, I've never been in a house like that. How I don't know what that happens to it in case of a flood. It was very strange, but I was very, very against the Mike Zimmer hire, and I talked about that as you were snacking on Ritz crackers and Captain Crunch. I told you this is lame, this is lazy, and I stand by the fact that I think the process of how they got here was very broken, and that they may have lucked into something special, but I'm willing to eat some crow. I'm willing to eat a contextually, proportional amount of crow because they've been very good. I'm willing to give Mike Zimmer the benefit of DeMarcus Lawrence being injured, of Micah being injured, of Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland at different points, at different respects. He turned DeMarvion Overshown into this superstar, obviously, before the injury. Joe, they have a turnover in 8 consecutive games. They last week pitched another game where they had 4 sacks and at least 2 turnovers. They've done that 6 times this season. I think on 6 different occasions, they've had 4 sacks and at least 2 turnovers. They are the first team in like 3 years to do that 6 times in a single season. And so I'm willing to see what there is to work with here. I do think that, if anything, I think a little bit less of Dan Quinn's time, not to take away from Dan, but I think it speaks to the talent that lanes and lives on that side of the ball ultimately for the Cowboys. But I think that if you're going to bring Mike McCarthy back, it would be stupid to not bring Mike Zimmer back as well. And to the McCarthy point at large, but Zimmer falls within that, you bring both back and you sign them to whatever 3, 4, 5-year extensions. And this team, Joe, I know you've heard it and talked about it, loves to say, oh, we would write any check to win the Super Bowl. Bring them back. And if next year they suck, just fire them. Just like, it's literally just money. And you love to tell us that you would throw that away if you could. So bring them back. And it doesn't mean that you're stuck for 5 years or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I don't, just back to McCarthy for a minute. I don't see Dak Prescott wanting to learn another system, and he would have to do that. He looks pretty comfortable in Mike McCarthy's system. Visiting with RJ Ochoa, the editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys. I don't know. I'm going to throw this out, RJ, and you can hammer me if you want to. That's fine. Mention Dak Prescott, Trayvon Diggs, both of those guys with serious injuries. DeMarvion Overshown, serious injuries. But let's just stick with Dak and Trayvon. I'm concerned about those guys being the players that they were before this injury.
I think that's fair. I mean, honestly, and I think it would be unfair to not say or worry. Nobody hopes this, obviously, but that they're injury prone, right? Especially Dak. I mean, Dak has now had an ankle and a shoulder and a calf and a finger and a hamstring, right? And so you just kind of wonder. And I think that we knew this after that crazy interception season that Trayvon Diggs had in 21. You were just never going to get that again. You could get a really good player, but I think it's fair to say the same with Dak as far as last year is concerned. When Dak Prescott's career is over, and he's obviously coming off of winning 6 straight Super Bowls, in a couple of years, we'll look back and we'll say no season was as individually prolific as 2023. Because how could it be? How could I think Jalen Hurts is a great example of that. He's still a fine quarterback, but that 2022 season, he's come nowhere near just because it was so exemplary. And so right. I think that's a fair concern. And I think that's why you have to hedge your bet. I think you look at the Eagles as an example. Jalen Hurts is not that dude anymore, but he has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley to bail him out and to lift him up. And so you have to stop acting like Dak has to be your savior, because you're only doing yourself a disservice at large, and you're obviously making him the scapegoat for him.
Yeah, my only concern, RJ, and again, he had a serious ankle injury. It's a problem. It limited his mobility. And now with this one, I'm afraid it's going to limit it even more so. Hopefully I'm wrong. The Cowboys, he's their guy. So hopefully he comes back and he's strong and ready to go. I know we've still got a couple of games left in the regular season, but Cowboys offseason is going to be a lot of fun. If you had to tell Jerry Jones, number 1 draft pick, first round, where would you go?
You've got to address the trenches, I think. I mean, you can make an argument for left tackle, right? Because it's possible that you're kicking Tyler Guyton to the right side. You can make an argument for defensive tackle because Monty Smith isn't anything special. You can make an argument for wide receiver because, you CeeDee Lamb, but again, kind of like Dak Prescott, you have to stop expecting him to be the show. You have to have multiple shows in town. You can make an argument for corner because you're not sure about Trayvon Diggs. You can make an argument for linebacker. It's very difficult to find a place where they could miscalculate this thing. Now, we will have this debate over and over and over again over the next 100 days. I do not want them to spend that pick on Ashton Jeanty. He's a wonderful player. He's talented. He's amazing. But the reality, while running backs do matter, taking one in the first round is a luxury that this team cannot afford. Now, if you want to go out in free agency and address all the positions that I just mentioned, then sure, by all means. But that is in all likelihood going to be the most valuable resource that the Cowboys have at their disposal over the offseason at large, not to mention their only legitimate one. So to spend it on a position that is dependent on so many other variables just isn't something that they can afford to do the way other teams can.
Yeah, no, Dad, and that's going to be so much fun. It always is with the Cowboys. The offseason is fun. The speculation and then figuring out what they do and then complaining about it afterwards. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I've got to ask you this question. RJ Ochoa, editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys. I heard this on a show earlier today, and I want to get your opinion on it. They were talking about Brock Purdy, and the host of the show said, well, he's a what-if guy. If you have a running back, if you have a good offensive line, if you have receivers, then Brock Purdy can get the job done. The other guy he was talking to said, well, you just mentioned about 90% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. And I agree with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that at some point over the last 15 years, it became like embarrassing to suggest that quarterbacks need help, right? I mean, we still live in this like, oh, if I'm going to pay him, now it's 60, but at one point it was $25 million per year, then he has to lift everything around him. Why? Like, why can't the front office do their jobs? Why can't running backs or receivers do their jobs? So, I think that we do sometimes weirdly penalize Brock Purdy for playing for a very talented play caller and on a very talented roster. I think that if I were running the 49ers, I would pay him. I would pay him right away because it will never be cheaper than it's going to be now. And I know that sounds so stupid, but you pay him now, and then if you make a mistake in a year, you figure it out. You think your way out of it. We've seen so many other NFL teams do this. We've seen the Rams or the Eagles or the Colts or whoever think their way out of spending big money on a quarterback. And so you can't be afraid of that. You can't live in indecision. You have to be willing to pull the trigger on something. Like, we're so obsessed with building the perfect roster and identifying this window that they can be great and win 5, 10 different titles in. When you have not that Brock Purdy's Wemby, but you have that guy now. Like, that's why we killed the Spurs. Like, go in now. Like, quit waiting to get off the ground. Just fly and build the plane as you go. So I think the idea that Brock is elevated by somebody else around him and how that makes him weaker is pretty stupid, because you can just keep finding those players. Like, the work never stops. You have to be obsessed with continually improving things, which is why some teams like the Eagles never, ultimately fall out of the picture.
It must be the Christmas season, RJ, because we've agreed more today than I think since the day I met you.
Maybe that's the 2025 spirit. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this year's just going to be one of harmony and peace and love and unity. And that's what I hope for, at least. And if you want me to piss you off, I can.
You will, I'm sure. At some point, yes.
Yeah. I blame you for the Captain Crunch fiasco of Oxnard. I blame you for people hating Dak Prescott. I blame you for Manchester United losing today. That's on you as well.
Well, I'm glad you told me that, because I didn't even know they were playing today. So that's good. RJ Ochoa, editor-in-chief, Blogging the Boys. Sure appreciate it, my friend. Was Santa good to you?
He was. He was great to my son. I was telling Pledge, my son is obsessed with trains, and he got a conductor hat. So he's been around just like, he got train whistle. Like, he's just, now I have that sound going on in my house all the time, which is great. But he's happy, and ultimately, I guess that's what matters to me.
That's all that matters. RJ Ochoa, thanks, buddy. Enjoy your weekend, and next week
you can do it.
New Year's Eve, all of that stuff. Enjoy all of this stuff that's coming.
I will. You enjoy stuff too, Joe. Happy New Year.
RJ Ochoa, editor-in-chief, Blogging the Boys.